Now we'll connect each of the draggable objects to a target object so we can control what happens when an object is dropped in the right place. If you remember, each object, like the mission object here, corresponds to a target object that has the same instance name but ends with _target. Remember that when you test the movie, everything snaps back to its original position. So let's set up the target object functionality now. Go to draggdrop.as, and in here we'll create another property called target. Right under original Y, create a property called target. And you can data type that to a display object. Remember, a display object can be any visual object. For now, our targets are movie clips, but if we wanted to reuse this code with another type of visual object, this generic display object will work for that as well. So now scroll down, find the drop method. Again, method and function is pretty much synonymous. I'm calling it a method because it's inside of the drag drop class. So right below stop drag, I'm going to create an if statement. And what I want to do is check to see whether this object is touching the target object. So I type hit test with a capital T, object with a capital O, and some parentheses, and then I pass in target. So if the object that you drop is touching the target object, which by the way we haven't set yet, so don't worry about that, then we'll run the code inside of these curly braces. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to hide the object that you dropped. And instead of putting the object that you dropped into place, we're still going to put it back to its original position, but we're just going to show the target object. If that's confusing at all, just write the code and take a look at how it works in just a second. Type visible equals false, so we're hiding the object that you dropped and disabling its interactivity. That's what the visible property does. Go to the next line. Then we're going to show the target. So target.alpha equals 1. So we're showing the target there. And then we'll run a method inside of the map class. We haven't created this method yet, but we're going to call it match. So go down to the next line and then type parent, because remember this is on the main timeline, so the parent object would be the map class or the document class. So parent.match and some parentheses, a semicolon. Now take a second to think about anything that could possibly be wrong with this line of code. What do we have to add to avoid getting any errors? We have to tell Flash to treat parent as a different type of object. In this instance, I'm going to tell Flash to treat parent as an instance of the object class. So instead of movie clip, I'm going to use object. The reason why I'm doing that is because object always works. Again, if I ever change around my code a little bit to reuse this, and I use a different type of class for the parent class, my code won't break. So let's save this file and jump over to map.as. In here, what we're going to do is connect each of the objects on the stage that you can drag and drop with the target object. Now before, when we worked in drag drop, we didn't connect it to the target object, we just specified what happens when it hits its target object. So let's go back to map.as and set up the code here. The first thing I'm going to do is create a property right below the open curly brace under public class map. So I'll create a new line there, type var space drag drops, all lowercase. Data type it to be an array. And then just type a semicolon there. So we're creating that property. We'll give it a value later on. Scroll down into the constructor method. Remember, the constructor always has the same name as the class. Below the constructor code comment, we'll give a value to drag drops. So type drag drops equals, and then square brackets for shorthand array notation, and in the square brackets, type the following: Mission, comma, Hollywood, comma, Grapes, comma, Death Valley, comma, Redwood, comma, Golden Gate, comma, Joshua Tree, no space, all lowercase, comma, and Lake Tahoe, also no spaces, all lowercase. Now notice these correspond to all of the draggable instances on the stage. Before you go forward, you want to make sure that you've typed these all correctly. So save this file. Make sure to save dragdrop.as, and then test the movie, and you shouldn't see any errors. Looks like everything's working okay. If you see any errors, just go through all the code you just typed in this movie and make sure that everything is correct. We could write code like mission.target equals mission_target, and then repeat that code for each of the objects inside of the drag drops array. However, now that the objects are stored inside of an array, we can just create a loop and write the code once and have Flash do all the work. So let's take a look at how that works. Create a for loop. So type for, some parentheses, and some curly braces. In the parentheses, we'll create a variable called I, data type it to a positive integer, that's uint, all lowercase, set it equal to 0. We'll run this loop as long as I is less than drag drops dot length, and then we'll increment I by 1 each time the loop runs. So we're going to run this on each object in the drag drops array. So before we write the code inside of the loop, I'm going to add one line above the loop. I'm going to create a variable called current object. So type var space current object, capital O. Data type that to drag drop. One of the new features in Flash CS5 is that you get code hinting for your custom classes, so we have it right here. It's nice and convenient. So don't give it a value now, just type a semicolon. This is going to represent the current object in the array as we loop through it. So inside of the loop, type current object, capital O, equals drag drops, all lowercase, index I, or put I in square brackets, and then a semicolon. So each time the loop runs, the current object is going to be Mission, and then Hollywood, and then Grapes, etc. So let's go down to the next line, and then what we're going to do is set the target property. So current object, capital O, dot target. See how that property comes up in the hinting window, even though we just created it a few minutes ago? It's the magic of Flash CS5. So we'll type that, and then space equals space. And what we're going to do is set it equal to the object that corresponds to the name of the current object, which is Mission, for example, or Hollywood, for example, and then add on underscore target. To do that, we're going to use the getChildByName method. So type getChild, capital C, by, capital B, name with a capital N, and some parentheses and a semicolon. Now here we need to type in the name as a string. So we have to type in current object, capital O, dot name, to get the current object's name as a string. So this is going to be Mission or Hollywood, but not as the object, as a string. So text and not a movie clip. And then we need to tack on underscore target. So after that, type a space, then a plus and a space, and in quotes, type underscore target. So now save the file, and we'll just add a little bit more code to this map file, and then we can test it out and see how it works. So scroll down, and right below the constructor, now this is going to be kind of confusing which curly brace to use because we have 4 closed curly braces in a row. So what you can do is scroll up, and look right under the constructor name, so public function map, and there's an open curly brace there. And if you go straight down, the closed curly brace is the one that corresponds to the constructor. So we have the closing curly brace for the for loop, and then the constructor. We want to put it after that. If we put it after the next closed curly brace, it would be outside of the class declaration. And if we put it after the for loop, then it would be inside of the constructor method. So we're going to define the match method as a method inside of the class. So type public. The reason why we're typing public is so we can access this method from inside the drag drop class. Remember, we made a reference to this function earlier in this movie, but we didn't create it yet, so we're creating it now. It's public function match, and some parentheses, colon void, and some curly braces. We'll add the code that this function runs later on, but for now we just want to define it. So save the file, and you should be able to test the movie without any errors. So click and drag an object to the right place. If it works for one object, it should work for every object. And it looks like it. Oh, that was the wrong one. I should know this as a California native, huh? So I'll close this window, and if you want to make one more change, you can actually add the hand cursor to appear when you roll over a movie clip that you can drag or drop. Let's take a look at how to do that real quick. Go to dragdrop.as, and then add one more line to the constructor method. And for this line, just type button mode, capital M, equals true, and a semicolon. Save the file, test the movie, and there's the hand cursor. So now that we're in dragdrop.as and we've written all the code, scroll down and we'll review the drop method. So here's what this code says. If the object that you drop is touching its target, which we said in the map class, you're going to hide the object that you dropped and show the target. So what you're actually seeing when you let go of the object that you drop is the target object showing. The object that you dropped is always going to go back to its original X and Y position. The reason why we're doing that is to make it easy to reset the game later on. Then what happens is we're running the map class's match method that we just defined. So now, when an object is dropped in the right place, it snaps in position, and the interactivity for that object is disabled. In addition to that, we've set up a hand cursor for when you roll over any of the interactive objects.